Good evening to those of you just logging in. We're really excited to talk about middle school tonight, so thank you for joining us. I think we'll get started. We might have some more folks join us, but we'll get them caught up. Good evening. My name is Allison West. I'm the head of the middle school. And although we don't have the chat feature running tonight, we do have a Q&A feature. So as you are listening to myself and my colleague Ben Shepard tonight, if questions arise, please feel free to populate your questions in the Q&A feature, and we will do our best to tackle all of those. I am really excited to talk with you all tonight about this topic. I absolutely love this age of middle school. I have chosen to spend a collective 21 years in the land of middle school, as has my colleague Ben. In fact, my colleague Ben, who's joining me tonight, he was actually once a middle schooler of mine at Carroll, and he actually chose to return to middle school. So to say that we live and breathe middle school is a true understatement. And I will also just make note, I live with an 8th grader and an 11th grader. So I see you. I am in it with you. All right. So for tonight, our hope by the end of this evening is we are going to walk away from this talk with a shared understanding of the middle school brain and adolescent development, which is enormous. I hope that you leave tonight with a clear understanding of the intentionality with which we've designed our middle school program, that progression from 6th through 8th. Really excited that Ben is joining me tonight so that he can showcase some of our student outcomes and the growth that we've been able to chart over the course of the last 10 or so years. And then we'll have an opportunity to wrap up and hopefully answer some of your questions. All right, so I'm actually going to kick it over to Ben, who's going to kick off tonight with a little bit of a data preview.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here with you guys and really excited to share some of this data. My role here at Carroll is working in our data and research department as our TCI curriculum coordinator. So I work a lot with our student data, and to say that tracking our students' data and outcomes and understanding the right levers to pull is complex, I think is an understatement. But we don't want to bury the lead on this presentation. We want to show you guys that our students are making really awesome progress over the course of their Carroll career. And so, being a data-focused school, that we're dedicated to supporting students with language-based learning disabilities and empowering them to really become proficient learners and have all the tools they need to succeed after Carroll. So what we're looking at here is a really high-level overview of some of the measures that we use to track academic outcomes, particularly Read Naturally, which is a measure of oral reading fluency on the left. What we know about reading fluency is that you have to read about 120 words correct per minute in order to comprehend what you're reading. In third grade, in third grade, when students get here, that's a struggle for them. And over the course of their career, we really improved to a point where about 61% of 8th graders that graduate are at or above that level. Really tremendous growth, and always more work to do. In terms of our Track My Progress, we have the same sort of trends where students come in third grade, performing about 48% of them are at or above the average range, and they end up at the end of 8th grade with about 93% above there. In math, it's a similar story. We're seeing tremendous growth from our students over their career, but the story isn't this simple. It's complicated. And what we see is that our students really need a longitudinal perspective of support and identifying roadblocks to their learning so that we can really break those down and help them develop those skills to become those proficient lifelong learners.
Thanks, Ben. So our goal after that little data preview is to really share how we get there, how our middle school program and how that middle school experience is really designed in an intentional way. And I love this image here because Middle school, or sometimes we refer to this as early adolescence, is a time of remarkable growth. This period of growth is complex, it is very uneven and super powerful. And but behind every single eye roll, mood swing, new passion, or maybe sudden show of indifference, there is really a neural pathway that is literally firing up. And I feel so fortunate that we have folks like Ben Shepherd and his team who are helping us develop these targeted cognitive interventions that are working to really strengthen those pathways. So, tonight, our plan is to pull back the curtain on why we do what we do in the middle school. As I mentioned, to share that very intentional design and to highlight the arc of sixth through eighth grade, how we combine a targeted academic experience, the mind, with a very purposeful social emotional structures built in, which is building the heart. Um, and our hope is that, again, that you leave with a better sense of how our educators are providing an experience that is truly designed for who students are becoming and not just what they need to learn. Um, as I mentioned, this is a time period that is critical in terms of development. And growth is happening across so many different domains. When we think of the cognitive growth that's happening, this is developing their capacity to think, reason, and problem solve in really profound and impressive ways. The social growth that we see is contributing to their sense of belonging. It's helping them develop the skills to navigate peer relationships. Students are beginning to explore their identity, discovering really who they are. The emotional growth that we see is centered around finding strategies to support regulation skills, building resilience, and developing that strong self awareness. In fact, I really want to make a point here to name that social emotional skills are actually what enable learning. So, without that strong sense of belonging and the ability to demonstrate resilience, have really strong perspective taking skills to navigate that peer landscape, students, particularly at this age, cannot learn to their potential. However, we also know that that prefrontal cortex, which you can see on the upper left of that screen here, that brain region, that prefrontal cortex in our students is still very much under construction. This region of the brain, it's best described as the brain's executive or CEO, and it's responsible for expressions of personality and decision making. It's responsible for moderating social behavior and enacting executive functioning skills, having impulse control, emotional regulation, just to name a few. So while this stage of development can sometimes feel like absolute chaos, much of the observable behavior that we see in kids at this stage is very much expected. At Carroll, we like to say behavior is communication, and we make real attempts to understand the underlying lagging skills that may need support. So, in fact, this time is not chaos. What we are witnessing is truly an explosion of growth. And it's a type of growth that really requires the right conditions in order to support students to thrive in the right direction. So, really, herein lies the paradox, right, of middle school. Our middle schoolers really need roots for safety and structure, but they also need the wings that honor their need for autonomy and challenge. And so that brings us to, what does this mean for Carroll Middle School? Well, we know we can't teach sixth graders the same way we teach eighth graders. We know that academic intervention must be paired with scaffolding and supports, and it has to build the social emotional functioning that we know students require. And we also know that our program needs to value social belonging, because social belonging isn't a nice to have, it's truly a prerequisite for learning. So really that tells us that middle school land is a very exciting developmental time. No, Ben can attest to this. No two days are the same. And I'm certain you've experienced that at home with your middle schoolers. The brain growth between this age is truly the greatest in our lifetime, with the exception of early infancy. So we know that middle schoolers can typically hold attention for about 10 to 12 minutes. And as parents of teenagers, I personally have to remind myself of this all the time at home. Also, at this stage, we know that students learn best through activity and collaborative opportunities with peers. At the very same time, the research tells us that students in this stage have a tendency to misinterpret emotions and instructions up to 40% of the time, which is a lot. So when you find yourself having to repeat yourself multiple times, just keep in mind that is unfortunately expected. And so all of this means it takes, again, a real intentional approach and a whole lot of patience to navigate this stage of development. At Carroll, one skill that we really focus on in the middle school with intention and care is the skill of resilience. And we know that in order to learn and grow, and this is true for all humans, we do so best when we know how to manage and succeed through struggle. And knowing what we know about the middle school brain and all of the developmental uniqueness of this time, resilience truly is key. And at school, we often like to refer to this as productive struggle. So, if you'll hang in there with me for just another minute, I would like to pause to specifically talk about the importance of resilience. So, I props to Amy Dempster, who's in the background here, for creating this visual for us. This is a visual of the learning pit. We did not create this model. This is a model that was developed long, long ago. This references that beautiful period of struggle where we can all experience when we are learning something new and it doesn't come as easily as we had hoped. I want you all to think about a time when was the last time you had to learn something new? And that moment where it just was not coming super easily. The magic happens when we're in that pit. When we're in that learning pit, that is where all of that growth and development happens. Now, if you think about it, we all want to be described as resilient. We want our children to be described as resilient. It truly is a positive character trait. It insinuates strength and perseverance, among so many other things. However, if you think about the last time you had to show resilience or be resilient, it often doesn't feel good at all. The best news is that it can be taught. And, we at Carroll very much value research based practices. And there's been a tremendous amount of research on resilience. And what it shows is that fostering resilience in students leads to improved academic performance, stronger well being, a larger capacity to problem solve and iterate, stronger engagement, and an improved ability to build strong relationships. And I would argue that the best thing that we can do for our middle schoolers is to commit to building our students' resilience. One of my favorite quotes that I heard actually this year from our consulting psychologist, Alex Hirschberg, is that as these kids adults, and that includes our team here at Carroll and you all at home, the best thing that we can do is help prepare, and this is the quote, we must prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child. And by committing to helping students build resilience and tolerating the discomfort they feel when they're having to push through that challenge, we are truly preparing them for that road, the road of high school, the road of college, and beyond. So, Ben is now going to share a little bit about how we personally at Carroll have studied the impact of a student's readiness to learn and its growth on academics.
Yeah, so when we're talking about some of these softer skills, these less traditionally academic skills that are really important for learning, Carol decided to engage in a project around 2017 to understand the impact of resilience and some of these other softer related skills on academic performance. So what we did was we developed a screener for our teachers to fill out for each of their students that asked them if any of these five areas: engagement, organization, social interactions, comprehension, or attention, are impediments to a student's learning. Are they getting in the way of their success in the class? And one of the things that I find time and time again doing research here at Carroll is that our teachers are so good at what they do, and they are so good at understanding the kids in front of them. And this is another a way that we leverage their expertise to really help us understand some of these complex relationships in areas that aren't as easily measured as is something like reading fluency or math outcomes. So what we did is we developed this screener, and we laid it kind of side by side with some of our academic tests. And what we found is that students that had less readiness to learn flags, they were more ready in those five areas of engagement, organization, social skills, comprehension, and attention. They tended to perform better across almost all of our curriculum and academic performance measures. So in this graph, what you can really see is the green bar is students that have less than one flag in the readiness to learn aggregate. And as more and more impediments to learning were flagged, their performance tended to fall on average. So this was kind of an eye-opening piece of data for us on how important supporting students in these areas is for their academic success and overall proficiency.
And so that leads us to really mapping out how do we build a program around all of these realities? And in particular, what Ben just showed us, which is we know that a student's readiness to learn is a key factor in meaningful progress. And so I'm going to take us through a little bit of an overview of our sixth, seventh, and eighth grade programs, connecting them to the specific developmental features of that stage. So sixth graders, our 11-year-olds, they are quite literally electric. Their cognitive structures in their brains are rewiring themselves at an amazing rate. And at the same time, we are beginning to notice some significant physical changes. You may notice they're a bit more restless. Maybe they're more energetic. They're certainly needing more food and sleep, although perhaps they never want to go to bed. The desire to connect socially at sixth grade becomes more pronounced. And yet at the same time, they're sorting out these questions of who am I? Where do I fit? Who are my friends? Here's an important point. Play dates become hangouts. We're not having play dates anymore. We're hanging out. There is a strong desire for more independence, and there's possibly even some of that limit testing. But don't worry, that limit testing is not a personal attack. It's actually a very important step. It tells us that students are ready. They're ready for an opportunity for healthy risk taking. And so we need to create an environment where that allows for that healthy risk taking. And this is a time when problem solving and critical thinking skills are really starting to blossom. In sixth grade, for those of you who came from fifth, you notice that we add science and history in. They are ready for that opportunity to be thinking critically. It is very common at this age for students to be so eager to learn new things, almost rather than practice and review. So you might be hearing at times that school's boring because we're practicing, we're reviewing. I already learned that. They really want to learn new things. What I love about our sixth graders is they are so primed to start seeing the world from different points of views and perspectives. They enjoy collaborative learning. And in fact, group learning in many ways is sort of essential for this stage of development. And maybe even most importantly, students in sixth grade are really beginning to learn how to name and manage their emotions. So it's important for us to really be intentional about how we help them navigate that. At the same time, while they're seeking this independence, our sixth grade program includes a high degree of adult support. Our sixth graders really thrive with those clear routines, predictable systems. In fact, I will often walking through the halls or even in the lunch space or recess, we will see adults practicing daily routines and modeling expectations with students. Academically, at this stage, there is a requirement that we really continue to focus on that discrete skill building through those structured routines, feedback, strong emphasis on effort and growth mindset. We're really building a solid foundation. Advisors in the sixth grade are incredible at explicitly teaching those characteristics of active learning. They're supporting students in setting goals. From a social emotional perspective, our sixth graders need a tremendous amount of direct instruction that supports friendship skills, managing conflict resolution, building perspective taking skills, all with the focus on fostering that sense of belonging. Um, and in both the structured and less structured times, what you would find in our sixth grade spaces is that there are always adults there present to support, guide, remind, and when necessary, redirect and hold students accountable. As we move to seventh grade, I lovingly refer to the seventh grade as the weirds. There is such a significant amount of growth happening at very different rates at different times across the grade. The rate of growth and development is so uneven, and it can sometimes lead to that confusion or tension with our students. It is also a very exciting time. Critical thinking skills in our seventh graders really start to deepen. And for those of you sitting at home with seventh graders at home, you may notice that they are questioning assumptions more. They're evaluating evidence and facts more, maybe even as you're asking them to do chores at home. You may also notice pushing of boundaries more as they understand or question rules and consequences. We find that in seventh grade in particular, expectations and consequences must be clear and they must be very understood. There can be no gray area. And they are craving more independence, and yet they require continued guidance. It is such a delicate balance. At this stage in seventh grade, students are exploring their identity. They're really trying to figure out who they are. What is their persona? Figuring out how do they fit or not fit into certain roles or in certain groups. And there is a real tension in our seventh graders between seeking their own individuality while also getting a very strong influence from the peer group. And all of this collides with a time of extreme emotional ups and downs. Students in seventh grade are really still learning how to regulate their emotions while there's a tremendous amount of hormonal growth happening. So we're really trying to help students learn how to respond rather than react. And here's a hot tip. Do not get on that roller coaster with your student. As the adults for these kiddos, we, the adults, the team at Carroll and you all, we really are their anchors. We are the people who need to provide that steady, calm presence to bring them back to that safe harbor. And we also give them snacks, which is very important. Um, just to point out a few more of the program details for seventh grade that align with these unique needs. Mentor Club is an option for our seventh graders that really opens up an opportunity for some leadership. We have something like 50 students apply to Mentor Club this year. It was our highest number ever. And with the need for more collaborative work, we have many more collaborative projects, science labs, that also provide students with opportunities to practice these skills in a supportive environment. Our seventh graders are reading more complex texts and problems. We're using restorative practices more efficiently as conflicts arise because students are developing a greater awareness of who they are while also appreciating the perspective of others. And finally, our eighth grade, our 13 and 14-year-olds. This is such an exciting year, and this is a year that really sets students to launch. At this stage, our eighth graders are really learning to find their voice. and they're defending and evaluating claims. They're developing that ability to think more deeply about complex problems and consider the many different sides and perspectives of a complex issue. You may have seen recently, Sean Wright put a note in our Thursday update about our approach to discussing current events. So many of our eighth graders are bringing questions and curiosities and wonderings. They're learning about the world. We see a maturation that comes as our eighth graders develop greater clarity of who they are, and they're beginning to identify and narrow their values, their goals. The desire for independence continues to grow here, and students are showing readiness to take ownership of their decisions and outcomes. And having autonomy and giving students space to develop that is so essential. So again, some programmatic structures that are essential at this eighth grade stage, so that we really are building structures that are helping students build that academic fortitude. We're continuing to release the scaffolding to practice that independent application of skills. We're openly discussing high school readiness, helping students reflect on their performance, on their setting of goals, on envisioning who they want their future self to be. Students in eighth grade get to apply for something called Hawks, which I'll describe in more detail in just a bit. But this is a distinction that really honors an eighth grader's growth, and it names that we trust. We trust them to have special privileges around campus. So I know that was a quick overview, but I do hope that what you notice as we continue is that the program here in our middle school truly intentionally builds over the course of a student's experience with the ultimate goal of launching students who are strategic, have a level of independence and self-awareness that really are helping them launch to their next place. One piece that I want to point out about our middle school program globally is our schedule. And I'm not sure that we've really communicated a whole lot about the intentionality of our schedule, but this schedule was designed truly with the middle school's unique needs in mind. So we know that this adolescent brain requires both the intellectual challenge and the social connection to thrive. And we also know that sustained focus requires the physical movement and that social interaction. And so, in order to do that, we have intentionally designed our schedule not just around academic content, but around the developmental needs of this group. We have purposely built in breaks and provide a few minutes between each period, intentionally scheduling only 2 blocks back to back without a break. So 2 blocks, we have morning meeting, 2 blocks, a snack and recess break, 2 blocks, lunch recess, and so forth. And these transitions and these breaks are not lost time at all. They really are essential opportunities for our students to build those social skills, to continue to establish relationships with peers and teachers, engage in very important play and downtime. If they need to, connect individually with a teacher or with a peer or with myself. So it allows for all these opportunities for different relationship building and skill building that is not confined to a classroom. I want to shout out Kate Collins for this next image, which I borrowed from her. Before we launch into the specifics of the program, I want to just take a moment to name that the bedrock of our program truly rests on the principles of Orton Gillingham and our commitment to developing students' literacy skills and math skills. Because reading and writing and math are so visible, they are really just the tip of the iceberg for us. But for our students who have language-based learning differences, it feels important to name that there is such a massive amount of invisible work that is happening beneath that surface. And I, for one, am just incredibly grateful and proud of the educators that I work with because they dedicate so much of their time and energy to working on these invisible skills that are so essential. And just want to take a moment to note that when your child is sitting in classes, yes, we're watching them read and write and solve math problems, but their brains are truly working overtime on some of the things that many of us may take for granted. The processing speed and memory. They're managing to keep track of everything that's happening all at once and move at a pace while still holding on to information. They're navigating word retrieval, knowing the answer, but maybe not being able to find the word, formulating those complex sentences. All of the executive functioning skills. Task initiation is something that can be so challenging. Organization, self monitoring, and of course, the social emotional impact, which we've talked about already. But all of this invisible work does lead to that cognitive fatigue. So we do see that students over the course of the day, at times, they just need a break. They're exhausted. Perhaps by the time they get home from you, they're tired. They're having a hard time getting started on their homework. And for many students, it's the impact of this invisible work that they're doing all day long. And so again, I just want to reinforce that at Carroll, not just even in our middle school program, I would say this is across the board, but tonight we're focusing on middle school. Our middle school educators are not just focused on what's above that water line. We're not focused on just that tip. We are explicitly teaching the skills that are needed to navigate everything that's below that water line. So, related to that, I'm going to pass this back over to Ben to share a little bit more data before I show you some more of the progression.
Absolutely. Thank you, Allison. I want to be clear about some of these longitudinal graphs before we get into them. We're looking at historical data going all the way back to third grade. But a way to think about this in the context of the middle school is all of the foundational work that our lower school teachers do or our sixth grade teachers do for new students is so crucial for laying a solid foundation for all of the other work to build on top of. And what we're looking at here is something we're really proud of. This is our graduating class last year and their oral reading fluency outcomes. We're looking at an average for the whole grade. And just to orient you a bit, there's a dotted red line indicating the 10th percentile, a dotted yellow line indicating the 25th percentile, which is the lower side of average on a normative bell curve distribution. The solid blue line is the average performance of our class of 2025. And the stars you see are where they started to peak up above the 120 words correct per minute mark and are solidifying their skills in that average range. Now, the thing to really note here is that there's a lot of work that it takes to get our students to a point where they're reading with comprehension at that rate of 120 words correct per minute. Often, on average, this doesn't actually happen until around sixth grade, particularly in the case of these graduates from last year. But what about all of the other students? Is this a trend that holds true for students historically at Carroll? Yes, it does. And so this is the same type of graph that we're looking at. I have superimposed the 120 words correct per minute mark on here. But what we're looking at here is an average over the last 10 years of student data. And instead of looking at one single average, we're looking at a range of performance. That's why you see that band, that blue band going through the data. Similarly, our students tend to solidify their reading fluency skills at a rate that supports comprehension around sixth grade. All the work that goes into solidifying that is intense, and it's a lot of work for our excellent teachers, but they're so amazing at doing that. When students first get here, it can be really challenging to engage them in areas that are hard. There's often some social emotional barriers that we have to overcome or some skill deficits that we have to fill in. And so all of that work is really happening at the lower school or in the first couple years of students' careers here. One thing I really want to point out here that it jumps out to me when I saw this graph is that when you get in that seventh grade range, you see that the blue shaded area really expands. This is the weirds that Allison was talking about. The seventh grade is a weird data collection point for us, but nonetheless, we see students rebound and continue to grow with the excellent support of the faculty and teachers and adults around them, both at home and here at Carroll.
Thanks, Ben. I wanted to include just a brief note about focus areas in the middle school. So, many of our students are in an Orton Gillingham based tutorial. What the research on reading also is very clear about is that in addition to phonics and phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, effective reading instruction must also include that direct explicit instruction in fluency, comprehension, vocabulary, written expression. And so in the middle school, through from the sixth through eighth uh, progression, those focus areas also grow and expand to include more of those topics. In fact, we also at times will offer a math focus area as students develop and grow in their proficiency of reading. Our tutorial model certainly expands. In our sixth grade class has probably the highest percentage, or not probably the highest percentage of one-on-one and paired tutorials. And as students gain and develop skills, students then can be in more collaborative groups, maybe trios or a small group of four. The next slide really just shows a quick representation of all of the middle school focus areas this year in terms of how students are split into certain size groups. So the blue pie, that blue slice, is indicative of how many students are in a one-on-one tutorial versus a two-on-one, which is represented in that red, and so forth. And as you go around the circle, you'll see that those groups do become larger. The Hero's Journey class is a class that is specifically for eighth graders, and that is a class for students who have shown mastery of certain reading and writing benchmarks and are ready for a more project-oriented experience where they're applying all of those skills. Now let's look at some specifics just that highlight the arc of sixth to seventh grade. We know that executive functioning builds at a rapid rate at this time, and I want to just highlight how from sixth through eighth we manage that. So in sixth grade, students are engaged in a curriculum called Tool Time. It's a very direct, explicit program that supports students in developing really specific skills and habits. They literally build a toolbox in the makerspace as they grow their skills, and they can earn tools as they show mastery and independence. In order to earn those tools, they actually have to fill out an application, and they then receive feedback from teachers. So it's really a process that builds on so many foundational skills that lead them to become a strong self-advocate. In seventh grade, they literally take that toolbox with them as they work to build habits of learning. For each of the habits of learning you see listed here, the seventh grade team is directly and explicitly teaching micro habits. And these are skills that students practice and also receive feedback on. They regularly set goals with their advisor. They get feedback from their teaching team along the way. If you have a current seventh grader at home, I encourage you to ask them about their WOOP goal, WOOP, and also have them show you their habits of learning book. They're doing a lot to take that toolbox and put it into practice. And then in eighth grade, our students are expected to take all of these tools and take all of these habits and really put them into practice and to select the tools from everything that they've learned and identify what is going to work specifically for them. Our eighth grade team is remarkable at helping students make the decisions about which tools and strategies are going to work best for them as they launch into high school. And as they begin to show this mastery and proficiency, as I mentioned before, they can apply to become a hawk. Students are also supported in learning how to best use study hall time. And that is really key when thinking about high school. They're supported in making arrangements with teachers during that time, really prioritizing how they're going to use that time. Are they going to collaborate with classmates? Are they going to study for an upcoming test? Are they going to get extra help on that math concept that felt a little tricky? So, really, it's about helping our eighth graders take all of those tools and then make the critical decisions that they need to make that are going to optimize their time. Similarly, our health and wellness curriculum, which occurs both during flex and within science classes, is scaffolded across the grades to really support emotional maturity for those complex social topics. We're helping students develop skills and strategies for managing stress, regulating emotions, building up to learning about strong decision making practices when really faced with a difficult choice to make. And it is built strategically year after year, year onto year. Each grade really works to build in meaningful field trips and service learning projects. So I'm going to show you a little progression here with just one example per grade. And we do this in order to help students really broaden their awareness and understanding of the world. So here we see sixth grade really spends time learning about the water crisis. And they then travel to Lincoln Waterworks to learn from real community experts. They get to visit the facility, they're asking questions, they're putting eyes on an actual real life example. And our sixth graders are able to engage in really rich discussions about water conservation, the big and small changes that we can make to improve consumption, and so much more. And this is a heavily scaffolded, heavily teacher directed experience that students benefit from. Now, when we move to seventh grade spends the year really diving into food insecurity. And a favorite trip of all of the students, and perhaps if you have a seventh grader and you haven't already heard about this trip, you need to ask them about it. We take small groups of students. These students are given a pretend family and a budget, and we bring them to a supermarket and we drop them off. I mean, we stay close. We are there, but they have to go and do the thing, and they are tasked with having to buy a week's worth of groceries. Now, they don't actually buy the items, but they are learning how to navigate a grocery store. They're learning that grocery stores are actually organized in a very strategic way. There's tons of previewing in terms of helping students understand the expectations for how to navigate these spaces. And I have to say, the reflections after are really incredible. Students are thinking critically about the cost of food. They have this incredible challenge of managing a budget, and really thinking and discussing the effort that is needed to provide healthy meals for a family on a limited budget. So much comes out of this trip. It's really incredible. So while the sixth grade was very heavily teacher guided and supported, this is also teacher guided and supported with a healthy dose of independence and learning. And then in eighth grade has a lot of really great trips and a lot of really great experiences. But for tonight's purpose, I'm going to highlight our 4-day trip to Washington, D.C. And this is a packed itinerary. We fly our eighth graders down to DC, and we get to spend an incredible 4 days navigating a variety of museums, exhibits, memorials. There are so many opportunities for students to make deep, deep connections with what they are seeing in Washington, D.C. to what they have learned at school, whether that was in a history classroom, whether that was a novel that was read in English or focus area, or a story that was discussed in science or math. They are making these deep connections. They are having this incredible experience with their peers and with their teachers. So hopefully you can see that even when we're outside of the academic classroom, all of the experiences that we're building from that sixth through eighth experience are really very carefully designed, keeping in mind the unique developmental characteristics of this time period. So before I move on to some academic examples, Ben is going to share some more data highlights.
We're going to dive back into the data a little bit, and we're going to dive into reading comprehension and some higher level reading skills that are measured from our Track My Progress measure that we use, which is a standardized, nationally normed measure of reading skills. And the way that we are going to look at this is that green dotted line is the Track My Progress average, nationally normed again. So this is students that some may have language-based learning disabilities, but most do not. Most are typically developing students. And again, we're looking at the Carroll 10-year average here. So we're looking at a band and a range of performance. But the way we want to think about this again, looking from third to eighth grade, is kind of our from the lens of instructional focus. When students first get here, we have to fill in the gaps. We have to build that foundation. And it's not until those skills start to solidify that we can really start building on top for the higher level academic tasks, like reading comprehension or writing. And once students start to solidify those skills, we see scores really improve up towards that national average and then exceed them once they get into eighth grade and beyond. We're incredibly proud of the hard work that the students are putting in all through this and the work that our teachers put in to support our students. And it is so empowering to see them thrive and excel in areas like this.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, so how do we build an emotionally sound academic experience that is designed to foster such meaningful growth? I'm going to show you some academic samples. To start, I'm going to showcase a series of novels that are often read in English classes. You'll note that there are lexiles here. And a note about lexiles. Lexiles are created based on word frequency, which is the difficulty, and the sentence complexity. So it doesn't measure the genre of a text or the interest level, or it doesn't give any indicator about how a student's prior knowledge is going to impact their comprehension. I note it here because teachers are very purposeful in the novels that they select for their classes because they want to ensure that students are able to decode them and really practice comprehension. So all of that data that Ben was showing you as it relates to the reading rate and how quickly students need to be able to read in order to access those comprehension strategies, we are using that data to inform the novels that we're selecting. So here we have a selection of books in sixth grade. And I just want to note that books are chosen to have cross-curricular connections. So in sixth grade, for example, when students are studying Bangladesh and history, there is this dynamic literary text that some ELA teachers choose, Rickshaw Girl, which is noted here. And so whenever possible, we do try to align those cross-curricular connections. And I also want to note that often books are selected to help develop a shared perspective in our students and to include books that represent all people within our student body so that we're having shared experiences as well. As we move to seventh grade, here's a selection of seventh grade books. Again, this is just a small sampling. Our lists are pretty extensive. I will just say The Outsiders is always a seventh grade favorite. It will remain one of my favorites to teach forever. And then as we move on to eighth grade, you can see here the selection of eighth grade books. The books were selected often at eighth grade. And you'll see some classics. You'll see some vignettes. But again, teachers are very purposeful in the selections that they make based on the students in front of them. When it comes to writing, our middle school writing program begins in sixth grade, helping students write in an 8 to 11 sentence paragraph. And by the time they're in eighth grade, they're writing multi-paragraph, multi-page essays. The purpose of these samples is to show you the difference. And these are actual student writing samples. This is a sixth grade writing sample. Students are taught the process. They are introduced to a variety of graphic organizers, which ultimately they will have to choose the one that works best for them. We really break down the steps of the writing process, and we're really working to develop at the sentence and paragraph level. It's really about quality over quantity in sixth grade. As we move to seventh grade, students are writing essays. They're learning to write an intro and concluding paragraph. Students are taught how to embed quotes to support details. They're expanding and varying their sentences. In seventh grade, we often will find that the writing sounds very formulaic still. Students are still very bound to the structures and the formulas. And it's in eighth grade where we really begin to see students finding their voice again. In eighth grade, we have students who are writing multi-paragraph essays. There's incredibly impressive literary analysis that happens in eighth grade. Students are not necessarily given the organizers. They are asked to select the ones that work best for them. They are really digging in and learning how to be efficient editors and revisers. They're learning how to use study hall time to meet with the teacher to get some more feedback. This piece in particular, which Amy, if you even want to go forward a little bit, this is a student writing an essay that's tying together the themes related to race, religion, and status, tying together 3 novels, A Mighty Long Way Down, Then There Were None, and Night. So we really take kids from, tell me about a place you want to travel, to really digging into some deep literary analysis. Before I talk a little bit about math and science and history, Ben's going to show a little math data.
Yeah. So as a school for students with language-based learning disabilities, some of our students are actually stronger in math than they are in reading, but some aren't. There's a variable profiles with our students all across the board. Similar trends in our math data, though. We see really impressive growth over time, with solidifying skills really coming in the middle school, meaning that with a solid foundation, we're really able to give our students the tools they need to thrive beyond the walls of Carroll. Amy, if you want to go to the next slide, this is some really interesting data and a really interesting way that we've looked at some of our data and how we use our academic data. In fifth grade, we flagged some about 55 students who fell in the at-risk or borderline areas on Track My Progress Math. So these are students that we wanted to kind of track through the middle school and make sure that we're programming appropriately for them to improve those math skills. And when you see your Track My Progress data, these are the students that are in the red and the yellow. By the end of eighth grade, there were only 12 students out of that 55 that were in the at-risk to borderline. And most of those were in the borderline range, which is below the 40th percentile for Track My Progress. That's incredible growth. And one of the amazing things about Carroll is we understand our students where they are. We meet them where they are, but we also support the ones that need additional support through areas like focus area and finding different times throughout our schedule. So I'm going to pass it back to Alice, and she's going to talk about how we do that.
Yeah, so this in some ways, I know this is a lot of words on this slide, and in some ways it's almost overly simplified. So you can see here the progression of math in the middle school. I want to note that such an incredible amount of thought goes into the placement, including the student skill development, their readiness, the results of all of that data and work sample analysis. We're also taking into account working memory and processing speeds, so much more. And so while you see these boxes that contain 6th, 7th, and 8th grade described, 6th grade, for example, has 12 different sections of math, and each one is very specifically designed. And so, yes, we have a general 6th grade math course or math class structure, but we have 12 different versions of that, and they're working at different paces. We hope that they are getting to the same place towards the end of the year. So as we're thinking about 7th grade, but the manner in which they're getting there is all a little different. And that is really beautiful. As we move on to the next slide, you're going to see a little snippet about science and history. So I'm not going to spend too much time here because I have some samples to show you, but sixth, seventh, and eighth grade topics in science and history. So much reading and writing is reinforced in these classes, and math. These are excellent opportunities for students to practice applying those skills. And I have to say, our science and history teachers, who are also Orton Gillingham trained, by the way, are masterful at weaving in literacy reinforcement while also helping that critical thinking, the problem solving, supporting collaborative learning, and so much more. Um, I want to show some samples of science first. So the neat thing about science is all of our science classes, sixth through eighth, do use this unifying diagram. So in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, at certain points, they are going to go back to this one image. And they're through questioning things about the world, they're practicing observation skills, making predictions, and really learning how to ask questions and carry out the experiments that are needed to answer those questions. In sixth grade, we start with observation, and students are learning how to write CERs, or claims evidence with reading. This is really done as a whole group. There are some smaller group discussions and sharing of observations, but really this is heavily, heavily guided. This is one of my favorite activities. We had a former employee dig up a possum skeleton out of her garden. And so we do a mystery skeleton exercise with sixth graders. And it is such an incredible opportunity for students to really dig in on those observation skills and creating hypotheses and testing those. In seventh grade, we're really faced with a question that they have to problem solve. So they brainstorm independently. Then they design the procedure with their peers. Students are taught how to collaborate. What does it look like? And after designing their experiment, they test it, gather results, analyze them, and then use the evidence to support their conclusions. So again, that scaffolding is really starting to come away. We're giving students more autonomy to make the decisions they need to make to be successful in that class. And then by the time they're in eighth grade, the science experience is, again, much more different. The work is more thorough. They're delving way deeper into the reasoning skills. They're completing a significant number of dissections where they're having to take those observation skills that they started in sixth grade, really put them into practice. And some of these science labs that our eighth graders are writing at the conclusion of a lab are quite impressive. And again, getting them ready for that high school science experience. In terms of history, so what I love about our history classes is we follow this sort of Margaret Mead quote: "We are teaching children how to think, not what to think." So in sixth grade, we're really building that foundation. Students are learning how to take clear, useful notes. We're directly teaching students how to read a nonfiction text, pull out that main idea, the key details. We're practicing how to take 2-column notes. Support is very high. This process is heavily guided. Teachers are modeling and they are guiding every step. This here is an example where students were practicing or learning how to take split page notes in order to write a pitch for a Sumerian Shark Tank project, which was really fun. In seventh grade, they take those notes and then they use it with purpose. So we teach students the whole idea about note taking, the process of note taking in sixth grade, and now in seventh grade, they're using it as a tool to learn. They are being asked to read more complex texts. They are now using these notes to study. We're teaching students how to use that as a study tool. And then students are also beginning to turn these notes into written claim evidence reasoning, written responses. These notes in particular, these were taken by students to help them understand the Massachusetts ballot question on the MCAS. So students were using those notes to write a CER about whether or not they should have to pass the MCAS in order to graduate high school. I'll let you guess on what their answers might have been. And then in eighth grade history, it's all about independence and synthesizing. Students are managing this information on their own. They are independently taking notes. Of course, the teacher is there as needed, but we're really pushing them to be more independent. We're asking students now to take notes from multiple sources, including videos, class discussions, readings. We're turning these into structured essays. They are really preparing themselves for the high school expectations around research and writing. These notes in particular, these are from a reconstruction unit where students were comparing the philosophies of Booker T. Washington to W.E.B. Du Bois. And students used articles, they used videos to complete their split page notes. And then they had to take those notes and they had to write a claim, evidence reasoning piece to defend one of their positions. So again, just showing you the progression of that sixth to eighth experience. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our multis. I talked at the start about how important it is that we deal with the head, but also the heart. And our middle school multis, even our middle school multis has a progression that feels really important. Our students rotate through all of these multis over 8 terms. But the sixth grade multis builds to the seventh, builds to the eighth. So the projects that they're doing, for example, in our makerspace in sixth grade are really setting them up to have an incredibly robust eighth grade makerspace experience. And they like to say we're playing with purpose, but students are really building skills centered around leadership, collaboration, problem solving, creative risk taking, and so much more. This also happens in our extended day. So we have, as you know, in the middle school, year-round opportunities for athletics. They are structured to provide opportunities for students to explore new interests. They're practicing their social skills. They're learning how to be advocates for themselves and take those risks. And yet they're tied to this academic approach and they're framed to provide this fun, safe environment for practicing these skills at a variety of different levels. And the same is true for our non-athletic extended day opportunities, whether students are engaged in art-based or bounders. We just put on this incredible Shrek the Musical, the performing arts. Of course, supervised study and other clubs and activities are all really tailored to this particular developmental stage. Okay, we have reached the near end, and I just want to highlight a few takeaways here. Thank you for hanging in with us. Our approach here is really, again, to borrow that quote from Alex Hirschberg, building the child for the road, not the road for the child. Our middle school program aims, of course, to develop proficiency in those literacy and math skills. That is, of course. But we are also working to strengthen the critical thinking and problem solving skills. We're also really leaning into practicing showing resilience, fortifying that emotional regulation, fostering that independence and self advocacy. And I hope that you're walking away tonight with a clearer picture of the intentionality with which this program is designed in order to honor all the unique developmental stages that our 6th through 8th graders are experiencing. And remember, do not get on that roller coaster. We are going to remain calm. We are the anchors. Thank you so much. Let me see if there were any questions. I don't see any questions in the chat. If you do have questions, we encourage you to reach out. You can reach out to myself or Ben at any time, and we're happy to have a conversation or follow up. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really love talking about middle school. We feel very passionate about middle school. And so we welcome you to come in anytime to talk further. Have a
Embrace
great
the
night.
weird.
Yeah.